Have you ever stumbled onto a conspiracy in real life? Have you ever accidentally gotten into a real-life conspiracy? Perhaps at work or school or university, like people doing suspicious things or government psyops. I saw this girl in a hijab at the metro station, twice at the same station. She was walking on all fours, but her legs were like backwards. She looked like a hell-spawned spider, and I almost flipped my shit when I noticed somehow, despite it all, she was carrying a begging cup, like some sort of human cricket. That was the most X thing I ever saw. If she could manage to run in that stance, I would 100% shit my pants. I was alone in Bangkok, waiting for the Indian visa process to be done. During a week I went to the Indian embassy a couple of times. I mostly went by taxi, because screw tuk-tuks. This one time I jumped into a taxi and asked him to use the meter for the fare. Okay, he said, and started moving. The meter ticked on normally. As we got to the embassy, he pressed a few buttons on the meter, and all of a sudden, it showed 4,000 baht. This is like 20 times the cost of the other times I took the taxi. I tell him there was no way I'm going to pay that. I don't even have that much money on me. The Thai taxi driver starts to threaten me and gets really aggressive. He clenches his fists and swings at me, but misses. After some screaming, he proceeds to drive the car away from the embassy. The speed is too high to jump off, and I have no idea where we are heading. The taxi driver says we are going to an ATM, and I'm going to withdraw his money. He tells me he has a knife, but I don't see one. I start to think how I'm going to get out of this mess, and I remember I have some American currency on me. I tell him to wait, I have dollars. The Thai taxi driver smiles smugly and pulls over to the side. I throw him a couple of dollars, and as he is trying to figure out how many baht that makes up, I open the door to jump out. As I open the door, he floors it, and I throw myself out of the moving car, landing and rolling on the sidewalk. He stops the car and gets out, yelling that it is too little. He wants more money. I start to run, and he follows me for a block or two, but luckily he's a fat bastard, and I can easily lose him. It ended up costing me more than I was supposed to pay in a normal cab, and I got a few bruises on my legs and arms, but I got away with my life, and without stab wounds, so I consider myself lucky. When I was 16, I worked for a company that allocated labor to rural areas of Australia. Basically what you did was tell them when you were available, and they'd send you to a remote farm for a few weeks where you would do whatever needed to be done. It was hard work and long hours, but good pay and good fun if you got in with a nice group of workers. When this occurred, I was working on a large property. I was told it covered roughly the same landmass as the state of Maryland, USA, about 9 hours from Sydney City, and the property itself was about 40 minutes away from the nearest town. In short, it was in the middle of nowhere. I was working at the farm, clearing bushland with 3 other guys my age from the city. Our boss was a guy called Jeremy, who owned the farm and supervised us while helping out with the work. He was pretty laid back and was generally really good to us. This summer in particular was very hot and the work was hard, so one day, when the temperature hit about 38 degrees Celsius, about 100 Fahrenheit, Jeremy decided to give us the afternoon off. He said he knew of a water hole on the farm at about a 25-minute drive north. I was keen for a swim, but the other guys just wanted to relax for the Arva, so him and I hopped in one of the work trucks and started heading across the property. It was mostly wide, empty expanses with a few clumps of scattered bushland. Jeremy wasn't much of a talker, so we drove more or less in silence. After about 20 minutes, however, he suddenly perked up and jabbed me in the ribs. Do you see that over there, beneath the 2 dead trees? I should mention here that if you're not familiar with inland areas, particularly those in Australia, they are brown or red and mostly flat and bland, meaning any bright colors stick out like a sore thumb. So you can imagine our surprise when we could see a large, blue, angular structure far off in the distance. We stared in its direction, and as we got closer, we realized it was a huge blue shipping container just sitting in the middle of nowhere. Jeremy was perplexed. I asked him if he knew what it was, but obviously he didn't. He said he hadn't seen it when he drove through the same area about 5 weeks before, and he wanted to go and see what it was. Initially, we pulled to a stop about 100 meters away from it. At this stage, I had a really bad feeling. The whole thing was not right. It's hard to explain, but if you can imagine seeing such a foreign object in the middle of a huge barren expanse, it had to be something weird. Jeremy, however, wanted to investigate, which I understood, given it was his property, but in truth, I was really serious. As we got closer, things got even more bizarre. There was a big diesel generator behind it, thumping away, and a CCTV camera on each side. All motion activated, so they buzzed from side to side, following us as we moved around. I tried to reason with Jeremy, something along the lines of, with all this security, someone obviously does not want us here. Let's just go. He brushed me off, however, reminding me it was his farm, and whoever had put this here was trespassing, so he wanted to go inside. Despite all the surveillance, there was only a small padlock on the huge door. We had some bolt cutters in his toolbox, and after a bit of struggle, we broke the lock and went inside. The first thing I noticed was the rush of cold air as we got in. The place was air-conditioned, which I must admit was quite pleasant on such a hot day. We searched around for a light switch, but I could already see this was some sort of IT setup. There were flashing LEDs all around the place, and the sort of hum you hear when a hard drive is working hard. When we finally switched on the lights, we could see a sophisticated, albeit somewhat cluttered, office setup. There were hard drives the size of bar fridges and other computer equipment lining the walls, sometimes about 2 or 3 high, and plastic storage boxes scattered around the far wall, and several desks with computer monitors arranged in the middle, complete with rolling office chairs. At this stage, I felt like I was in one of those nonsensical dreams that made absolutely no sense. We wandered to the middle and sat down at the desks to see if the computers could give us any idea of what the hell was going on here. My heart was racing, and I just wanted to bolt. We had been seen by the CCTV, so if anyone was monitoring, they already knew we were here. Jeremy, on the other hand, was adamant that we had to get to the bottom of this, so I just put on a brave face and started looking through the computer. This went on for a while, but in short, neither of us had a very high grasp of technology outside of Facebook and Microsoft Word. The best I can describe it from my lay position is that it was endless lists of computer talk. It was like the old Napster or LimeWire download screens looked like, just constantly picking up and receiving data and then recording it on several windows. I gave up on the computers and walked cautiously over to the far end of the container, to the big pile of storage boxes. By then I was pretty sure no one else was there, as there was nowhere to hide really, but I was still incredibly on edge. I decided, against my better judgment, to see what was inside all of those boxes. My brief sift through the box still makes me feel sick to the stomach. It didn't take long for me to realize that this box was full of posters, DVDs and photos, all of hardcore CP. One thing that still gets to me is that it was all neatly ordered into folders and smaller boxes. These people were organized. I immediately recoiled, jumped up, and ran over to Jeremy. I could hardly string a sentence together. I said something to the effect of, "Mate, get out. Go. Get the fuck up." I dragged him out, composed myself, and managed to explain what I saw. We jumped back in the truck and sped back to the house. The farm had no mobile phone reception, and we hadn't brought the satellite phone, so we had to get back to the landline to call the police. Once we called them, they still had to make it all the way there, to the farm, from the nearest police station, which was in a town about half an hour from the town closest to the farm. As I mentioned, very remote. We waited, talking frantically about what we had seen, until the cops arrived, almost an hour later. They arrived with 2 4-wheel drives, and we jumped in and led them back. This is where it gets worse. By the time we got back, the container door was open, and there was fire inside. We only had 2 small extinguishers in the cars, and these did very little. The fire department took an hour to get there, by which stage most of the damage had already been done. An arson report by the federal police found almost no evidence of the computer equipment described, and only traces of paper and cardboard. This means that whoever ran it knew we were there, and had time to come and remove most of it and got away. There were various ways to get off the property, and the landmass was huge, so there was no real way to tail them. Since the police hadn't taken us all too seriously in the first instance, probably due to our poor explanation on the phone, aerial surveillance was also impossible by the time we had pieced it all together. I took a keen interest in following it up, but with no real evidence of who might be responsible. The investigation went cold. I've kept in contact with Jeremy, and the shipping container is still sitting there on the farm, as it is too expensive to move. I will never forget what I saw in those boxes. Live in Pennsylvania. Have an awesome gun club. $30 for first year membership. $15 for renewing every year. No red guards. RO is never there, and when he is, he always has a beer and cigarette glued to his hand. His only purpose in life is to yell at people for shooting target stands. Go shooting during the weekdays because 1. My work schedule changes every week/part-time, and 2. The place is deserted for the entire day on any given weekday. Have a week off and decide to hit the range every day to blow through some old steel case 9x19 I got from a friend. Show up around 8 o'clock in the morning and shoot until noon. Nothing out of the ordinary the first day. Come back Tuesday. Every target stand from 25 yards out to 100 is plastered with pictures of Japanese soldiers and just random pictures of Asian people, all of them peppered with holes. Take down all the targets, set up my shit, shoot, pack up, go home. Next day, 8 o'clock, show up. This time there's a stop sign at the 100-yard line, an old faded yield sign at the 50-yard line, and a speed limit 25 sign at the 25-yard line. Once again, all peppered with holes, none of them attached to the stands, and just left leaning against the back steps. Collect them, put them all next to the firing line, leaning up against a tray. Do my shooting and leave. Wednesday, 10:30 a.m., late breakfast. Show up, and notice that today's theme is aircraft. No particular rhyme or reason. Everything from black and white printouts of Ju-87s to Russian helicopters and Cessna 150s, all of them generic Google image search pics. Notice the road signs are no laying all across the range. Getting sick of this guy leaving shit for me to pick up. Decide to find out who the fuck it is. Show up Thursday with a cooler and lunch and a fuck ton more ammo. Today's theme is mixed. Half of it is what appears to be seemingly random printed out clip art from MS Word, and the other half is mostly pictures of birds. Playing whole morning. Breaking in some new magazines. Eat lunch around noon. Go back to plinking, and then break out the nugget. Shoot the nugget at water jugs that I brought along until 4 o'clock. Dude did not show up. Figure I'll never see him, so I pack my shit up and walk the 100 or so yards uphill to my car. Pack everything in the trunk, about to hop in for the ride home, and I notice a piece of paper underneath my windshield wiper. Thanks for cleaning up. Your aim is improving. Look around. Nobody there. Suddenly really unsettled, and nope the fuck out of there. I don't go shooting without a friend now. Be me, around 2010 or so. Getting off airplane, walking down the gangway into the airport. Full flight, lots of people around me. Right as I come through the gate into the waiting area, the middle payphone in a bank of free on the wall opposite begins to ring. What the actual fuck is a payphone doing here? And when was the last time you saw one that accepted incoming calls? Used to crank call as a kid, and that feature was rare back in the 90s. I'm staring at it as I walk forward. No one else even acknowledges it. Pick it up. Hello? Men's voice on the other end. Oh, thank God. Listen, I need to talk to a woman named Martha. She's about 5'9", blonde, shoulder-length hair, and she should be getting off the plane at gate 46C and wearing a green top. Look over to gate 46C. I'll be damned. There she is now. Okay, hang on 1 second. Set down phone and approach very attractive, total stranger. She's literally walking off the gangway as I spy her, and I intercept her before she's out of the waiting area. Hi there, Martha. She is weirded out but smiling. There is enough of a crowd around that this isn't threatening or creepy, but it is still odd. Yeah? Sorry to bother you, but that phone was ringing and someone gave me your name and description, and he really needs to talk to you. Huh, it's a little weird to me too, but no one else was answering, so. She goes to take the call. I go to baggage claim. She comes up to me like 15 minutes later when she sees me at the luggage carousel. She asks, so you didn't know who that was, but you found me from his description? Yeah, no clue. Who was it? I have no idea. He was looking for a different Martha. The call was not from me. We stare at each other, waiting for one to admit the prank or reveal the hidden cameras. 2 beats. What, seriously? Yeah, I am not the right Martha apparently. She shrugs and kinda has. We're both just too shocked by the improbability of it. Polite murmurs and go our separate ways. 2 teenagers went in a woods to do some spotlight hunting for nocturnal game. Both teens meet other teens who had heard a rumor about some pot grow, and they decide to look for it. Although they separated a small distance, they were all in earshot of each other. The 2 that initially came for hunting, Ives-Henry and Kevin Ives, end up bumping into a group of adults walking around the woods at night. Adults seem peeved that these kids are there, and start demanding to know what they are doing. Both teens try to play it off, and the other teens who heard the commotion watched from the nearby brush. Teens in bush saw them move into another area, and then heard the sound of gunshots and yelling. Don and Kevin ran off, and were later found, berated, and got the shit kicked out of them by local police who forced them into the back of a cruiser. Don and Kevin afterwards were found sleeping on a nearby railroad track with a blue tarp covering them. Both got pile-drived by a train, but enough material was present to show that they had been dead for some time. Every witness that came forward regarding what they saw the night they went missing was either killed, died in a car accident, or intimidated by local police. CIA/FBI has a file that's pretty much black bars for days. Several officers, district attorneys, and even Bill Clinton, then governor, have been connected to the case and local drug/human trafficking rings. My personal view is the local department was involved with the trade, and the kids came across a bunch of officers on a drop pickup. I am a little drunk, so work with me here. Be about 1 to 2 years old, living in a medium-sized house with my mother and stepfather. Remember bits and pieces of memory from the house. Even as a child, I sensed a very, very off essence from the place. Too young to express it, obviously. An 8-year-old looking child would follow me around constantly. Never in a rapid manner, would just stand in corners, watch me play, etc. Was too young to even register this thing as something scary. Just kind of assumed he was supposed to be there. Too young to question otherwise. Remember a certain occasion where I was watching my mother do laundry in the basement. He stood in the adjacent corner of my mother and would just look at me, just stared. This happened all the time, but for some reason I remember this picture more vividly. Move out of that house at around 3 years old. Be me, present day. Ask my mother about that old house. Tell her pretty much everything I just listed above. She informs me that a kid died in that house from a small fire before we moved in. Also, 4 weeks after we moved out, before anyone could buy the house, it randomly bursts into flames and burns down. It's not exactly my most terrifying experience, but it's something that still gives me shudders just thinking about it. Looking back, I like to think that kid was just following me around to witness the youth that he was robbed of. It sounds a little twisted, but he never harmed me or any of my family members, so innocently enough, maybe his spirit just looked at me as a baby brother. Something to support this theory is how he got us to move out of that house before it randomly burned down. Now that I'm thinking about it and typing it out, it kind of saddens me. This is my dad's UFO story. This story takes place truly in the middle of nowhere in the mid-1970s, when my dad was about 11 or 12. The way my dad described where it happened was by Alpine, kind of close to Terlingua, which is funny, because those towns are like 18 miles apart. If you get a map of Texas though, and look below Marfa and Alpine, and a little bit above Big Bend National Park, you'll see a vast expanse of nothing, which is hundreds of thousands of acres of private ranch lands, and just general Texas nothingness. My dad was with his uncle and his cousins, who had a property deep in the middle of nowhere, and they were going to stay for a few days at said property. It was accessible by traveling over 40 miles of dirt road, and this meant over 2 hours of slow, bumpy riding. The day was hot but beautiful. Not a single cloud in the sky. When they finally got to the small property, they started to unpack the truck and put their belongings inside. My dad's uncle said that they had to climb a hill to get to a well so that they could gather water. So they all climbed the hill to where the well was located, with their buckets and canteens. My dad was fooling around, waiting for his turn, and kicking some rocks around. That's when one of his cousins pointed at the sky. There was a small cloud in the sky, and it was the only cloud in the sky. He said it was small, gray, and very round, almost a perfect sphere. Everyone stopped what they were doing to watch it. It slowly got smaller and smaller, and then finally disappeared. They thought it had evaporated, and thought it was a cool little weather phenomenon. When my dad took his turn at the well, his cousin shouted that it was back. My dad turned around, and sure enough, it was. It was in the exact same spot and was static in position, but once again, it grew smaller and smaller, then disappeared. Then it would reappear. They watched this go on for about 15 minutes. My dad, being as young as he was, thought it was some kind of alien spaceship. His uncle was watching it through his binoculars and handed them to my dad to see. My dad said it didn't look like a cloud, but like a swirling cloud of smoke. It would shrink into itself, then reappear out of thin air. He said he was struck with fear and felt the urge to lay down. He was trembling and didn't know why he felt so nauseous and frightened. His uncle ushered everyone off the hill and back down to the cabin. He felt better after a few minutes, and nothing else like it happened over the weekend. I asked him what it was when I was at his house, if maybe it was a smoke cloud or smoke signal, but he explained how there was no column of smoke connected to it, and it was too high up to be dust or anything else. They also could not figure out why it was just stuck in the sky, in that one spot, shrinking into itself and then reappearing, like a creepy pulsing dance. He went back out there a couple times after that, but never experienced anything remotely like that again. There's plenty of stories about that area. The Marfa lights have been debunked, but there are other mysterious happenings that come out of Big Bend and between Highway 67 and 118. That's all I have for now. Renting a place in a townhouse. Very busy one-way street. I'm sitting in a chair looking out the window for quite some time, enjoying the thunderstorm. Notice a pattern. The same 5 vehicles keep passing by repeatedly. Other traffic too, but amongst them are the same 5 vehicles. Every 3 minutes or so they pass by. What? I honestly start to think I'm getting schizo or some shit, so I tell my roommate and get him to watch. He scoffs and thinks I'm fucking with him. Motherfucker, just do it. He reluctantly watches. I point out the same vehicles going by. Look, Toyota van will go by, then red Honda, then black pickup, blue Chrysler, and some little cuck wagon. I don't even know what it is. They go by in that order. He seems skeptical, saying those are all common vehicles. I tell him to wait a few minutes and call out the same vehicles and tell him to pay attention to the drivers to prove that it's the same cars and not just common cars. It happens, and I make a point of pointing out the color of shirts each driver is wearing, so the next time they come around, he takes notice again. It happens again, then again, and then again. He looks bewildered and says, "Man, I don't even want to think about the shit, and goes back to his room. No idea what the fuck that was about, but it was so fucking weird. I watched for about 2 hours before I got bored of it and did something else. Southern occult folklore. Anyone got any from the modern era? We all know this fucking place is haunted as ass. I've had a handful of experiences myself, including seeing, with my own 2 eyes while totally sober, and with a totally sober friend, seeing an old black man in chains hobbling out of the woods. We ran for a second, realized he might need help, turned around, completely vanished. But of course it's not just the slaves haunting us. My friend owns a rocking chair that a very wealthy plantation owner used to sit in, and it will rock on occasion. No wind. He's a smart guy. I don't think it's placebo. So anyway, I'm pretty high. Does anyone here know any southern occult shit that happened in the modern era? Like the Memphis pyramid having a crystal skull put into it type of stuff. Thanks 4chan. You and my body pillow are my only friends. Tennessee guy here. I have a few personal anecdotes about weird shit, but here is some info about an enormous child trafficking scandal involving orphanages in Memphis in the first half of the 20th century. Georgia Tan headed up to the Tennessee Children's Home Society, an organization whose intent was to find homes for displaced children. In reality, over 5,000 children were illegally obtained by Tan for kidnapping, falsified documents meant to incriminate their parents, bribery of state officials, etc. While some of these children ended up being adopted by genuinely well-intentioned families, many of the children under the care of the children's home were never heard from or mysteriously vanished. Additionally, at least 500 children died while under the society's care. The racket was eventually taken down around 1950, but there is still no information on the thousands of black market adoptions that went missing. B. Me, at age 19, came from a low-income neighborhood in a somewhat large college town. Little crime as a kid. Knew that things were getting worse as I got older, but I was living at college, so didn't really know. Mom would call me and tell me about stuff. She got followed and harassed when walking one night. More shady characters from Chicago about. More burglaries and domestic violence incidents. Anyway, being me visiting home for Thanksgiving break. There is a park up the street, notorious for shady activity at night, or at least it is by the time I'm visiting home. A few gang tags, etc. That day the cops had a community building event, mostly hung up a bunch of balloons. Cops handed out hot dogs and franks on paper plates to families, etc. Feeling super safe, convinced nothing bad will happen if I visit Childhood Park. Oh boy. Later at night, around 9 p.m, but it's November, so that is quite dark. Decided to go for a walk in park. Tell my parents that nobody is going to do shit, with a bunch of smiley face balloons hanging up all over the park. Just want to go use the playground that I liked as a kid when nobody else is there. Walking into park, it's dark. Eventually realize there are 2 guys with hoods sitting on a bench along the trail that leads to the playground. Afraid of what will happen if I stop and turn around, so I keep walking. Actually scared now. Keep in mind I'm a pasty basement dweller white guy. They're talking low under their breath. Just when I'm past them, I hear one of them say something about the alarm system. Immediately freeze like a moron. They stop talking and are probably staring at me. Immediately raise my hands and say, "Hey guys, I heard what you said, but I don't know what you look like. So if I just don't look back here, I won't know who you are if you are going to do something." Hear one of them pulling out a gun, I think, because I hear something clicking. Deep voiced man says, "Do something, bitch." Can barely understand what he says. Just keep my arms raised and slowly walk up to the playground, terrified, and play on it like an autist for what feels like ages, facing the opposite direction of the guys. Want to leave. Don't know if they are still there. Can't hear them. Yeah. Is it okay if I leave now? Silence. Hello? Silence. I get off the playground and work up the courage to turn around, but right before I do, I swear that I heard a voice of some sort. Immediately take off walking deep into the park. It connects to a neighborhood on the opposite side. walk straight in that direction through pitch fucking darkness until I reach a neighborhood. Call mom who drives and picks me up. The next day found out that there had been 2 burglaries in the night, a few hours after my mom came to pick me up. I grew up in a town that had a ton of families who gave their kids performance/growth enhancing drugs and created a recruitment network to bring way overqualified people in to teach and coach their kids without having to send them to private school. I can give a few stories if anyone is interested, and I'm not just shouting into the void. Basically, there was a whole community of families who had created a network of doctors to give them HGH and more exotic treatments. I knew of a whole class of students who were on nootropics for at least a semester and leveraged their dominance of the local voting base to exploit school funding so they could get a magnet school-like experience at a fraction of the cost because it all came out of their property taxes anyway and was only a minimal extra charge, all things considered. These people ran the town.